Hi, everyone. Hi. So I'm Winnie Lamb. I know it must be hard to pay attention when there's a much cuter turtle on the big screen. But anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you guys here to the talk today. And of course, our speaker, Dr. Caleb McClennen, who's the Marine Conservation Director at the Wildlife Conservation Society. So he's going to talk to us today about oceans conservation, about turtles, and how we can help by participating in swimming with turtles in Belize. So let me tell you about how Caleb and I first met, which he's looking at me nervously about. I don't know why. But anyway, so when Caleb and I met for the first time a few years ago, I remember that day I was wearing the exact same thing that I'm wearing right now, which is this funky, ridiculous looking turtleneck. Literally a turtleneck. Anyway, so we got chatting, we hit it off, got talking about turtles. And then sometime later, he told me that he needed volunteers to help his scientists with a turtle population survey in Belize. And so, of course, me being a big turtle fanatic, I was like, yes, please sign me up. And I'll bring a bunch of Googlers with me, too. And so there we were last year in Belize, swimming in one of the most beautiful oceans of the world. And I was really excited that I got the chance to touch and hug a turtle. I'd like to think that he was hugging me back too. Anyway, so without further ado, please help me give a really warm welcome to Dr. Caleb McClennen.
Thanks, Winnie, and thank you all for taking some time out of your day to be here. It's really a great pleasure, and we look forward to talking a bit more about turtle conservation, a little bit what WCS, the Wildlife Conservation Society, does in Belize and elsewhere for turtles, and then how, like Winnie said, some of you may be able to help if you're able to come down and spare a week in the tropical seas swimming after turtles. And there's a few folks here who did the trip last year, so I might call on to just provide the real story behind what I'm saying in terms of the turtle surveys. But the results we got back last year is that it was a really positive trip, and we tweaked a few things to hopefully make it even better this year. So look forward to questions throughout. I'm sure the style here is if you got something to ask, no need to wait for the end, and but I'll also leave some time for questions. So today we'll just talk a little bit first about turtles, just to get a sense of why, besides the fact that they're cute, yes, but why we care and why we're spending a lot of time and effort, and why it's worth your guys' time. Besides the ancillary benefit of nice weather and maybe a tan or a sunburn, to think about them. So I'm just going to provide an overview of the three turtle species we primarily see at Glover's Reef, which is where the survey takes place in Belize. The three turtles we'll talk through are Loggerhead turtle, green turtle, and Hawksbill turtle. So this is a photo of a Loggerhead turtle, similar actually to Winnie's photo. This is in the New York Aquarium. The photos often for loggerheads are a very popular aquarium species, and so you'll get these crystal clear shots, which if anyone says was taken in the wild, generally are taken at the aquarium. Loggerheads we see down in Belize, but are actually one of the main turtles on the southeast U.S. coast. Most of the nesting and a lot of loggerhead habitat is in the southeast U.S. So the United States government and a lot of community organizations in Florida, Carolinas, throughout the Gulf have a big role in the conservation of loggerhead turtles. Of course, the Caribbean plays an important role as well. They use the Caribbean grounds, but in some ways the Caribbean experiences the benefits or costs of good or poor U.S. management. So you may see some loggerheads down at Glover's, but it's not necessarily the dominant species. One of the biggest impacts for loggerheads is bycatch and trawl nets. So you probably heard a lot in the news of trawl nets scraping over the bottom. U.S. has done quite a lot, and other countries as well, to try to design nets that don't catch turtles, but still there's quite a lot of damage. And just recently, I think there's a lawsuit launched on the West Coast here in California on loggerhead mortalities for the Pacific population, because they think about 1,000 a year are killed in net drownings. Turtles breathe air, so if they get dragged under for too long, they drown and die. So anyway, the Northwest Atlantic loggerhead you might see, The second one is the green turtle. One of the largest turtle populations historically. Historically, green turtle populations were 30 to 90 million individuals in the Caribbean population, Caribbean and Western Atlantic, and now they're down to less than 300,000 is the estimate. We don't absolutely know because there's not a perfect annual turtle census, but this is massive orders of magnitude. So sort of post-Columbus surveys coming in say that the green turtles were just everywhere as far as the eye can see, similar to what you think about as cod up on the East Coast or some of the salmon fisheries you have here, just massive quantities. But the big problem with green turtles is they taste really good. Green turtles eat seagrass. They're the only fully herbivorous sea turtle, and they're consumed by populations for hundreds of years. They're also very easy to keep alive on colonial ships and trading ships. You simply turn them upside down, and you can keep on feeding them and keep them alive for a very long time. So green turtle populations were decimated historically, and then even in some places till the present day. This photo is of a green turtle on seagrass beds, which is where the dominant green turtle habitat is. So usually you'll see green turtles in seagrass beds, but you also see them at Glover's Reef, and so it's our second most common turtle that we have out there in the atoll. And then the most iconic turtle for coral reefs is a hawksbill turtle. And this is a turtle that's also known, you'll see turtle shells in general are quite charismatic, but particularly the hawksbill shell was used for turtle jewelry, and still in some places today, even though it's illegal, is used for turtle jewelry. They feed over 90% on sponges. So they're feeding on sponges on those reefs, those big barrel, all the different colors and shapes and sizes you see on coral reefs. And their populations as well. Estimates range from the sort of pre-contact populations of 500,000 to 1.5 million in the Caribbean. So an order of magnitude less than green turtles. But now they're thinking about 12,000 nesting females of hawksbills in the entire Caribbean right now. So when you see a hawksbill, that's a few blocks of the city of San Francisco, 12,000 individuals, female nesting hawksbill. So a very small population. But you do see quite a few at Glover's Reef. And interestingly, it's a lot of juveniles that are there. So it's quite important habitat for a life stage. And it's also lets you, as you see Winnie hugging the hawksbill, they don't actually look too big when you see them there because they can be close to a little over a quarter of a meter when they first come and arrive. But primarily be focused on coral reefs. As well, I didn't mention about green turtles. Green turtle nesting is huge in the Caribbean. Tortuguero in Costa Rica is maybe a place a lot of people have heard of, has historically been a very important nesting ground for green turtles and has been very successful there. And hawksbills tend to nest in a lot more sporadic areas. So even the smallest of islands in Belize and other places in the Caribbean can be quite important for hawksbills. They nest all over the Caribbean. So these are the three species that you'll see when you're out there. Of course, other people know of leatherbacks, olive ridleys, Kemp ridleys. There's a number of other of species that are out there. These are the ones that you see, and of all of them, the hawksbill is the most threatened out at Glover's Reef. And for that reason, it's a big priority for WCS right now. So what makes the turtles so vulnerable? There's the issue of the historic catch, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. One of them is they have this life stage that makes them incredibly accessible, but incredibly vulnerable. So we all know of nesting turtle beaches, and one of the biggest successes is the amount of effort we put out there to protect turtles. This is a turtle nesting in Southwater Key, just west of Glover's Reef, so a little closer to the mainland. And it's a hawksbill laying its eggs in the sand. But right at that moment of nesting, there's a number of different things that can happen. You can take the turtle and eat it in some places. The eggs can be crushed. The eggs can be predated on by other animals. And beaches can be used for development. Lots of lights can go up. So the nesting process for turtles has made them incredibly vulnerable. That explains a lot of the loss. Once they get out, as probably most of you know, these are this is bigger than life size right here. So when they first come out, they're very small. It's a baby hawksbill actually off of our program in Nicaragua, where we protect a great number of hawksbill nesting beaches in the Pearl Keys on the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. And a typical clutch will put out a little over 100 eggs, but only about 1% of those will survive because as they come out in the water, they're extremely vulnerable. How many people have been to turtle nesting beaches and seen this either on vacation and then how many people have seen it on TV? Okay, right. So you'll sort of get a sense of it. If you haven't seen it, one of these times when you're in the tropics, it usually you go out late at night. It's very much worth your while to go check out a nesting beach and see that act of either a turtle laying their eggs or the hatchlings being released. But this second part of their life stage, or wherever you start out, is also incredibly vulnerable. Not only them getting off the beach and getting out into the ocean, but then they're essentially floating around in the middle of the ocean for a while in these convergent zones. So the Sargasso Sea in the Atlantic is quite important because a lot of marine life aggregates there in their developmental stages, and they're just going to float around there until they get to be about 20 or 25 centimeters, and then they'll swim back to some feeding grounds where they can survive. So you have a very vulnerable strategy for them as well, which they're in trouble with just natural predators. But then when we bring in human impacts, this is a historic map of St. George's Key in 1764, recreated for a publication in the 1960s. I'm not sure if you can read it there, but on this map of this small settlement, there was a trading post or a bunch of turtle corrals. So places where they brought the green turtles in and kept them until traders came and they can sell them. It's estimated that for about 200 years in Belize's history, which was British Honduras at the time, for 200 years, turtles was the primary fishery, the primary marine economic engine of the colony, which is not something that even enters our mind today, that sea turtles could be the primary driver of economic activity. So this historic hunt and harvest of turtles was a big part of the decimation. And then still in the 1960s, people are actively and legally harvesting in Belize, in this case, loggerhead turtles. They have a bunch of loggerheads stashed up and then cleaning out the carcasses. Turtles are going to take anywhere from 30 to 50 years to have their first clutch. So things that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s are still having their impact today. So it was a 1-year commitment to turtles doesn't really mean anything. A 10-year commitment to turtles doesn't mean anything. It's a very long-term commitment to start seeing the results of your actions take place. But this historic first meat harvest, and then in the Victorian age, in the late 1800s, turtles started to be used for jewelry. So the hawksbill shell was starting to become a prized jewelry until fabricated materials started to replace them. So that played a significant contribution. You see some examples of the Hawksbill jewelry, which you say, oh yeah, I bought sunglasses that look like that. So the imprint, the pattern imprint of Hawksbill shells are still in our fashion design sense today, or maybe a barrette you have, even though most likely most of that you have now, or hopefully what you have now, unless it was passed on from grandparents, is not from Hawksbill shells. But you see the volume of carapaces that can be collected for this type of trade. And then also, this is actually a photo from only the last 10 years in Nicaragua, where direct harvesting of eggs takes place, just to eat the eggs directly, not to raise them up or anything like that. So a number of different uses of the shell and the products of turtle. So we talk about the historic hunt of sea turtles, but just to continue to paint a grimmer and grimmer picture for what, frankly, in marine conservation is something that we've done a lot of good things for. But it's just important to recognize that this is happening is still in the Caribbean. There are legal hunts of turtles going on today. And then, as I think probably most of you know, the turtles are swimming throughout all the countries. So a turtle we find in Belize one year might be over in Cuba later on in its life stage, and it may have been born in the Windward Islands in the Caribbean. So they're moving around quite a bit. But these are photos from our program in Nicaragua, where it's estimated still about 10,000 green turtles are taken a year in a traditional harvest, not for export, but for meat consumption. So there's still a great amount of pressure on sea turtles still today. On the expression, I just thought I would mention here, though it's a little bit morbid to say it, of turning turtle comes from, once you turn a turtle over, they can still survive, obviously, for a very long time. They're still breathing air. This is how they'd be transported on ships across the ocean for their meat. The meat would stay fresh, but they weren't going to be going anywhere. And then finally, like I mentioned with the loggerheads earlier, the issue of bycatch is something you hear quite a bit. Turtles getting caught up in shrimp trawls. Any type of bottom trawl is catching the same things that turtles are eating. So there's a big opportunities for turtles to be taken up in those trawls. A lot has been done. Turtle exclusion devices, or TEDs, have been innovated to try to inhibit the amount of turtles that are taken up. but still, as long as you're fishing on the seafloor, there's a good chance that you could be collecting marine turtles. So you see, sometimes you think about wildlife conservation or any type of conservation, and there's one major thing you have to do, and you can potentially, if you do that one major thing, like create a protected area or stop the trade in ivory, maybe that's going to make a significant difference. And with turtles, there's just all these different components to the threats that have happened through different timelines or also happened with different constituencies. And what I would like to do next is move toward some of the optimism side. So a lot of this stuff has happened in the past, and now there's patchwork, but internally and increasingly turning into a considerable amount of effort by WCS of one of many groups that is out there helping to save turtles and protect turtles, and a lot of governments that are out there as well. And Belize is really an interesting story, and where the work we're going to talk about at the end comes in is an interesting time in the history of protecting turtles, essentially. So here's a review that was done by Piniak and Eckert 2 years ago, just looking at how turtles are protected in the Caribbean. The gray areas are complete protection. The dotted areas are protected with some exceptions. Most of those exceptions are for traditional or artisanal or customary type hunts. Those could vary from the Nicaragua case of being thousands and thousands of turtles to only a few turtles taken every year in some jurisdictions. And then you have actually full legal fisheries still happening in some countries as well. So even though some parts of turtle exploitation are well governed and protected, there's still a patchwork of management. And as I mentioned before, turtles are going to move between jurisdictions quite a lot. This, by the way, are the exclusive economic zones of countries out to 200 nautical miles, or the halfway point between countries if they abut each other as they do in the Caribbean. But Belize, in many ways, has come almost full circle. You see, it wasn't on the map as under full protection because there is still the potential for an exception for customary take, although it's not used. It has come the whole way in terms of turtle protection, such that now the Fisheries Department of Belize, who you'd be working with when you're there on the trip, is taking care of turtles, untangling them from gear, and if anyone ever were to be harvesting turtles, has a relatively robust enforcement effort out there, protecting for a number of different marine things. So the Fisheries Department of Belize, the country of Belize, has come quite a long way from historically when they were, that was the dominant part of their economy. Just to trace it back a little bit, the first efforts to protect turtles in Belize were in the late 70s, where under the Wildlife Act, there was an attempt to protect turtles fully, but it conflicted with the fisheries provisions that were the Fisheries Department that was trying to have some sort of catch controls and managing the harvest. So really for the late 70s all the way through the 80s, there was still ongoing take and harvest of turtles. Another effort was made in the early 90s that was a full protection of Hawksbill turtles, because Hawksbill, if you remember from the beginning, now we're talking only about 12,000 nesting females today in the Caribbean of Hawksbill, so extremely vulnerable. So a full protection of Hawksbill and then size limits for other turtles happened in the early 90s. And it wasn't until 2002 that Belize put in the full protection for all species of turtles. But now, not only, I don't know how much you talk to people who are working on conservation, but you hear about what the real law is and then what the reality is in the ground. And it's taken quite a long time, but now, for the most part, most turtle harvesting that people have heard about in Belize has stopped. So for 3 decades, there's been this slow wrench down on turtle harvesting to the point where it's quite rare today. You still have entanglements or things where they'll need to be free, but there's not a direct, and there isn't too much of any sort of black market activity going on. Interestingly, Belize, because it was part of the British government when CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, stopped trade in turtle exploitation around the world. That was signed in the 70s when Belize was still part of the UK. And so when Belize declared its independence afterwards, there was a sort of a convenient ignoring of the fact that they had signed it under the British when they were part of Britain, and so it was not actually in effect until the late 80s for Belize. So the Japanese imports of Hawksbill turtle carapaces and turtle products in the 80s were still spiking quite considerably from Belize. So there's still these pulses in the 80s while wildlife protection measures are trying to happen on the ground, not having the impact that they have. But today turtles are quite protected. Belize also leads as one of the most robust marine protected area systems on the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. So this is a map of Belize. The Barrier Reef is on the east side right there. You can see it extending all the way down from Bacalar Chico to Sapadillo Keys. Glover's Reef is just the offshore atoll. You can see it's all in green, meaning it's all part of a marine reserve. And so the government of Belize not only has been protecting turtles, but is increasingly protecting a number of species, setting aside areas for no fishing zones, and creating a number of different places. And just about a month ago, Turnef Atoll, right here was just declared as the newest marine reserve in Belize. So the government is continuing to advance not only protection of turtles, but the entire marine ecosystem, which when you think about all those different impacts is what it's going to take to conserve turtles. So just a quick background of WCS in Belize to get us to the point where we'll talk about the trip that we're thinking about. This is an aerial view of Glover's Reef Atoll, where we're now one of our base of operations is. WCS has been operating in Belize since the early 1980s, and we work to help declare some of the first marine reserves, or the first marine reserve in Belize, Holchan Marine Reserve, have since moved on to help manage Glover's Reef, Southwater Key, and are helping the government of Belize in a number of their different measures to protect turtles, to reform fisheries. We have a large program to work on shark conservation throughout Belize. So we're doing quite a lot in Belize to help manage the marine environment. Belize, as you probably know, is a global priority for marine conservation because it sits on a very biodiverse Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. We have about 20 staff in country, a lot of them out on the station, some of them in Belize City that you'll meet as well, most of them Belizean who are working to conserve the area. Just a few shots of some of the other things that exist. So we're talking about turtles, but other really important species and iconic species that are out there on the reef as well. Anyone know what these are? Gander? Failure, no. So they're Nassau Grouper. You can tell by this little spot back here. And Nassau Grouper are ecologically extinct throughout a lot of the Caribbean. They have this unfortunate habit, similar to turtles, of coming together at a part of their life stage where they become really vulnerable. They come together to spawn. Historically, fishermen have decided to put nets around or hooks and catch them. But we do quite a lot throughout Belize to protect Nassau Groupers. And now all known spawning aggregations of Nassau Groupers are protected, including Northeast Point at Glover's Reef, which has a big spawning event in February, March every year. Belize has cetaceans like a number of other countries. This is actually the first dive I ever took at Glover's Reef, and I turned around and heard the whistling of a beaked and bottlenose dolphin that just swam right by. There's not any exploitation of these species going on right now, so they're safe, but they do obviously have a historical legacy, and they change the dynamic of the environment. Elkhorn coral is a very vulnerable. It's on endangered species list in the U.S. because of disease and climate impacts. And it's the main reef-building coral. If you see this when you're in Belize, in the Caribbean in general, you're quite lucky because a lot of the stocks have been decimated in the 90s, and now they're starting to come back as well. But elkhorn is one of many species of coral that is quite important and worth thinking about conserving. So here's a shot of Middle Key. This is the research station on the north point of the island, which is actually the left side of your screen right now. The rest of the island is now being left to restore its natural habitat, and there's a trail that goes around the outside. This is where we conduct all of our research operations, as well as we host the fisheries department that runs all their enforcement patrols from the station as well. They have an enforcement tower as well as a number of different equipment in their boat that they can go out to look for violations of the marine reserve, and you run into them there as well on your turtle monitoring. The station itself has several dormitories, a galley, the fisheries base, classroom. We're as solar as we can possibly be. We have a very large solar array that basically can manage the load when people are there, although we do have backup generators if the demand is really high, if people are using a lot of electricity. We also take all of our waters coming off the sea roof, off of the roofs. The toilets are all compost, but they smell quite fine. So as much as possible, we try to be an eco-friendly research station. it's great for our mission and it's great for the planet. It's also the way to live on islands. For any of you that have been on remote islands or out in the remote desert, it just makes economic and sense as well. So here's another photo of the team from last year. And going in now to talk about the surveys that you'll be doing in Belize, or at least some of your friends will be doing in Belize. I think a really important question is here, why, with everything we talked about, why is it important to be conducting these surveys? These are the only in-water surveys for marine turtles in Belize. Right now, if you remember, the hawksbill, which is the dominant species we see out there, is the most critically endangered of all the turtles in Belize as well as in the Caribbean. There's this long life cycle issue of from when they are born to when they start having offspring as well. So if we don't monitor and learn about what habitat they're using, what's happened to the populations at a number of places around the Caribbean, the species can blink out before you necessarily know it. And so at this point in time, while the population levels throughout the Caribbean are at the bottom of their curve, we hope, or potentially still declining, monitoring simply the status of a population, getting a sense of their size, how old are they, getting a sense of their health, their use of the reef. Do they use certain parts of areas over others? Because if they do, maybe we should have more protections there just to make sure there's no incidental catch. That type of information is really critical. Plus, you'll see the Belize Fisheries Department, some of our staff, in some years, students from local schools come out, building a national pride around sea turtles and about understanding their biology, and their importance is quite strong as well. So the sea turtle monitoring absolutely is a core priority for us. And the thing that makes this trip interesting is we need the human power to do it. We can't do it. We only have a few staff on the station, so we need a bunch of people out there. As the folks that did it previous years will tell you, or last year will tell you, it is a difficult work. It's a lot of work out there swimming, but it's critical for us to achieve our conservation. So I think I'll just to take a moment here. This is one of the Belizeans coming up with a hawksbill. The basic idea of the turtle surveys is we transect the entire atoll with a number of different line transects, and you're looking both for sightings of turtles, and then if possible, you're capturing turtles, not forever, but capturing them to measure them and to take health assessments and a number of different things. Obviously, the capture rate is quite different than the sighting rate. And so we're not able to capture as many turtles as we can sight. And last year, a few of the volunteers were able to capture some, but we were still able to capture 20 or 30 turtles. I guess with this slide up here, I should ask if someone last year someone was here last year, maybe say one or two things about the experience out on the water while they were on the trip. Want to go for it?
Basically, the water is amazing. So sometimes you'll have really good visibility, and you can actually see the ocean like down to 100 feet deep. Like you can see from the boat down to the bottom, you can see like sharks and coral. So basically, we were just kind of like, you're floating along the top looking for turtles, and if you spot one, you kind of raise your hand, and you can wait for one of the fisheries guys to come help you catch it, or you can kind of attempt to free dive and catch a turtle. But these guys can free dive to 75 feet deep, so maybe that's kind of a little deep for your average swimmer. But basically, you got to kind of sneak up behind them if they're just sitting on the ground, because if they see you, they'll kind of dart off and swim away. So you kind of try to come up behind them and kind of grab them, and then you. So these guys right here, I think they're doing a relay because the turtle is so far down, so they would actually grab it and then pass it off to another guy because they're holding their breath really long, and those turtles are kind of fighting for their way. You gotta add something?
Yeah, it's a bit of teamwork. Yeah. Catching the turtles definitely takes a bit of teamwork. Often with one person to go down, and because you have, as Elaine was saying, you have to sneak up on them, and you can burn a lot of air waiting until you grab it, and then hand it off to somebody else who's maybe a little fresher to swim it up to the surface, and then there's other people on the boat who take it from you as you pull them out of the water, and they are ready with tape measures and things like that to weigh them and tag them.
Yeah. But it's pretty amazing because once you get them to the top, you can actually get to do like a measurements, like how wide they are, how long they are, and take little tissue samples for them to send back to a lab and do a analysis on them.
Yeah, it's just you just have to work a little bit to focus on the task on hand and not get distracted by all the pretty things in the ocean. The visibility is ridiculously good by Northern California standards.
Great, thanks guys. Yeah, so we do want to emphasize, and I hope you got it, that it is some work as well as fun, but there's obviously some wonderful distractions to have. Did you have a question?
Yeah, do you ever use scuba or it's all?
Not for capturing the turtles. So we do scuba for a number of the different type of surveys that we do and the research that we do out at Glover's, but not for this, because you have to bring them up to the surface. So the decompression issues. Yeah.
How long are they out of the water? Like how long do you hold on to them?
It's about a half hour that you can keep them up there. Did you guys have a timed set you had to worry about?
I think Winnie's better. I don't think we had him out for half an hour.
Well,
You guys had less?
so I have to confess, I was the weakest swimmer on the trip. And I discovered this pretty much on day one. I was swimming in the transect, and then the WCS person on the boat kept telling me, swim faster, you got to keep up with the crowd. So eventually I just ended up staying on the boat most of the time to do the measurements and the tissue sampling that Elaine was talking about. But in terms of how long we were spending, I think it was probably half an hour for each kind of excursion, and then we would take the boat off, for a 20-minute ride, and then we'd go off to another spot, and then we would do another survey at that other spot, et cetera. So I would say it's probably a half hour to an hour for each stint.
We were in the water, and the turtle was out of the water for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
As long as it takes to weigh them and measure them and sample them.
Right.
And tag them.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, obviously the minimum amount of time as best as possible. So this, let me go through just a couple more slides here. So the turtle comes up to the surface, and if you're lucky, that's you or your friend who you spotted the turtle and they went down and got it or pass it off. Then there's this measuring of the carapace, which we use to be able to get the age of these turtles. And you see some of them, again, are quite small because Glover's is really an important area for juvenile hawksbill. And some subadult greens. And then you're there getting ready to put the turtles back in, and eventually as soon as you got all the work done, they go back in the water. We do can put mark recapture tags on them if they haven't been marked before. A lot of these turtles have spent over a year at Glover's, particularly the hawksbills, so they've already been tagged, and so we'll just make that note in the data set. Just as simple, I'll keep on taking questions on the trip in a second as well, but just a quick overview to give a sense of this is Glover's Reef in a quick schematic form, absolutely not Google Earth, but we're looking at about 50 kilometers long lengthwise, and then all of the transects that were swum by the team last year. And the blue is the Hawksbill turtle on those pie charts, and this is the summary: is the vast majority of the turtles you're collecting are blue are Hawksbill turtles in blue, and then greens, and then a few loggerheads, as well as a few unknowns when the turtles were too far in the distance out there. But you see, last year we caught between 70 and 80 turtles, which is actually a lower number than years before. So hopefully things do tend to go up and down as we have that. Maybe we'll see a few more this year as well.
You mentioned that the number of species were not trained.
Yeah, so we're not, there is some of the statistics that we do is sort of taking into account how the data that's coming in, and so sometimes maybe there's multiple people seeing the same turtle, so we have to take into account that sort of duplication of effort. So, is that what you're pointing out, or something different?
We had some problems getting in line. Our transects were really good at the end, but we were getting in sync.
Oh, I see. Yeah, making sure you're not running over people's transects or moving. Yeah. So this is not Glover's Reef, and it's not a mistake. So this year we're going to be purchasing a satellite tag so that you can live with your turtles for long after you leave Belize. And there's a great website, seaturtle.org, which is a nonprofit in and of itself, but also a coalition of nonprofits working on sea turtles. And they'll publish the results up on their website so you can track your turtle. This is actually a leatherback from Gabon, from a partner organization, University of Exeter, that we work with in Gabon, and you can see tracking a turtle all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. Your turtles in the Caribbean will not go, for the most likely will not go all the way across the Atlantic, but we'll see. So this year we're going to add that element, which will add a little bit more to the time on the surface, because you actually have to fix on the satellite tag. We'll have one or two of those, which would make for some interesting data coming out as well. as well, we're going to be looking at fibrio papillomavirus it's a disease primarily in green turtles in the Pacific, but it hasn't been investigated yet in Belize. So we're going to, WCS, as well as running conservation programs around the world, also runs 4 zoos and an aquarium in New York City. And a great side benefit of that, or primary benefit, is we have tremendous veterinary capacity. So our chief vet's going to come down this year and help do some health examinations of the turtles there to see how healthy they are, what type of disease they may or may not have as well. So that'll be another thing, keeping some of the turtles out of the water just a little bit longer this year, but also add to some more information we can learn about the population, particularly for hawksbills, where we want to try to mitigate any sort of impact that they're having, that's experiencing them. So just to close, and then I'll take on any other questions we have. A reminder is this turtle survey is one piece of our efforts at Glover's Reef. It's a very important piece. We're doing a lot of other work at Glover's Reef. You will do some transects work on corals as well as a sort of side benefit of this. But we're doing a lot of work there. We're also, for the turtle work, we spend a lot of time and effort in Nicaragua, where there's great mortality of green turtles, like I mentioned in the beginning, still today. We work to protect hawksbill beaches in the Pearl Keys in Nicaragua. We work with some partners in Panama to protect hawksbill turtles as well. And then we have a set of sites. We work in the waters of 20 countries around the world. We have about 250 staff, mostly nationals of the countries where we're working on different types of ocean conservation for coral reefs and hawksbill turtles in the Caribbean, Western Indian Ocean, and the Coral Triangle here, as well as some of the most important areas for whales, coastal dolphins, leatherback turtles in Central Africa. You saw that previous image. So this is a piece of what we do, but it's a very important piece, but you're also partnering up with an organization that's doing quite a bit for ocean conservation. And so it's an exciting organization to work for, and I think an exciting organization to join, at least on this trip. So with that, I'll just take any questions. Sort of threw a lot at you in 40 minutes about what's going on. So I'd love to answer any questions about turtles, conservation, or other. Yeah.
I actually have 2 questions. How long are you in the water per day? Because it's like half-hour station, so is it?
Yeah, you're good. Well, so there's a morning session and an afternoon session. So if you're the morning, you'll spend monitoring the turtles. In the afternoon, some days you have flex. I mean, obviously you're an adult, so if you decide you don't want to go in the water, no one's going to be whipping you and getting you in the water. But several hours in the morning, is that about what you guys spent when you're on the turtle surveys? But then you're also, when you're not in the water and you're on the survey, you're in the boat. So moving from one transect to the next. So it's quite a lot of time in the sun. And so you see most people are wearing skin suits, hats, all that. I mean, you need sunscreen, but you also want to make sure you have as much material on your skin as possible. And then when you're not in the turtle survey, there's other transects that we're doing on for coral health and other pieces. We had talked about, actually at lunch, an idea which is, we are really good at conservation. We're not technical experts in thinking about how to manage information, how to collect information in the way that you guys are. And so, this would be the second year of this partnership, provided we have 8 people sign up. And it would be really great to think about, well, what could you guys bring in terms of technical capacity, and thinking about how your expertise could combine with our expertise. And so some people talked about potentially bringing some underwater cameras to fill underwater image archives, or automated image collection, or a range of different ideas. So we'd be really open to hearing about that, either when we're on the trip or beforehand as you're signing up, saying, I got a great idea and I got someone I'd like to trial it with. So.
And my second question is, I was just in Gili, and there's turtles there as well.
In Indonesia?
Yeah. And we were told explicitly, like, by dive masters, not to touch them.
So
is that just a...
So you should absolutely not touch turtles or coral or anything in the water. It's better not to touch them. And so these slides, which we've shown, are not a slide of, hey, you should book a vacation to Belize, go to a hotel, and go grab a turtle. If that's the take-home message, then I should be fired, and I will be like putting my application to work some other place. No, it's a cost benefit of, in order to save these species, which are critically endangered, we need to understand them more. We need to be protecting them. We need to understand if our protections are working or not, because so far there's a lot of decline in populations. So some of the cost is the tactile aspect of touching these animals, doing health investments. None of that is done for just pure, I wonder, type science investigation at this point because they're so threatened. So by no means should this be thought of that, yeah, you should touch things when you're on recreation. We do fully believe that it's, when you're in the ocean, you shouldn't be touching things. So, and if you think about it, the number of people who are doing research is a pretty small amount of people. If you take that amount of touching and then say all people that happen to go on a hotel vacation in the tropics, your impact magnifies pretty quickly. So it was a long way of saying, no, they're right and I'm wrong. Other questions?
I'll ask another one. What are the currents like? I mean, I assume it's protected since it's a reef, but.
Well, you are on the outside on most of the transects on the outer shelf, and it is pretty much a wall in most of the places. If there's heavy currents, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, if you went out when there's too heavy currents, we would not, if the conditions are unsafe, we're not going to have you doing surveys. Because sometimes there are big seas. I was just at Glover's in October and we had 6 to 8 foot seas and we're scuba diving. That's quite a lot to be bobbing around. So generally we want to be doing them in close to flat water. But that would be, there's a dive master and a boat captain on the boat that would just be making that call and making sure it's not unsafe. Obviously currents also mess with your transects, so generally it's not very good. Did you guys have much current when you were? Yeah. I mean, incidentally, Glover's is known as one of the best dive spots in the Caribbean as well. So and that's not because it has a ripping current that will sweep you out into the ocean. It's just got fantastic wall dives, and so yeah.
Do you have tanks and air and everything? Do you want to use scuba?
Yeah, we are not a scuba operator, and we're not an ecotourism operator there, but there are great ecotourism and scuba outfits there that we will set people up with. Who we've worked with for a long time and they're raising the profile. So that's absolutely an option for in your time off when you're not doing the turtle surveys. You will get, I got mixed reports. So either you'll be extremely exhausted or you'll have extra energy at the end of the day. But definitely you should take advantage of diving when you're down there as well. So, and if you don't decide to go on this trip, going to Glover's Reef and signing up with those resorts to dive on your own is a great idea as well. You're right there in the middle. Yeah, you can also book it. And some people, I don't know if they took advantage, but we did say the rainforest is pretty amazing in Belize as well. WCS helped set up the jaguar reserve there a long while ago. And so the rainforest and all the other sites in Belize are quite important. And the zoo as well. We got to vote for the zoo as well. Right after you go to the Bronx Zoo, yes.
What's the fitness level required? Like I know you said that a few hours in the water, but how long should you actually be able to swim?
You should be a strong swimmer. I think if you're if you're a strong swimmer, you'll be fine. If you're if you're just learning to swim, or if you're not so sure, if you couldn't say, yeah, I'm a strong swimmer. I don't mean Olympic swimmer, but if you just know you could spend an hour or two in the ocean, no problem, you're fine. But I wouldn't understate. I think we learned a bit is that you do need to be quite able to hold your own in the water. But that being said, is there's also work on the boats as well. So if you have a question about that, we can chat about it more and figure out.
Does WCS have other conservation efforts on
We work in just to quickly show you the Belize map here. We work in Southwater Key, which is to the west. And then we have shark conservation work off of Gladden Spit and also throughout the country. We have a number of different shark conservation projects, particularly Lighthouse Reef. I thought it would be easy to go back, but it's taking a long time. So just to quickly show you. So we're working Glover's, Southwater Key. These two make up about 33% of the protected areas. Lighthouse for shark tagging. And then we do have shark research for a number of different places as well. We do not have current terrestrial projects right now, if that's what you're asking. Yeah.
This is a very easy question, but is there internet connection from where we'd be based?
I don't know why you'd ask that question. I can say actually, I need to make a joke about last year. Last year we had our presentation here and our computer didn't work. So like half of the presentation was like, of all the places. There's Wi-Fi and it apparently worked quite well. I think you can do everything you need to do. You're not going to be able to stream video, but there's Wi-Fi at the station itself. So in the evenings, a lot of people use their computers and did what they needed to do. Sorry.
Sorry, the question was related to what you said earlier on, that you were asking about people who could use their skill sets, and if there were people that could use like data skill sets, would they be able to do it from the island, or would it be before or after?
I think it's a big issue for us to figure out how to better manage our data. People are asking about, what have we done with all the results from last year? And we're still working on the processing. A lot of it's just capacity, but we could start the conversation before. But I think when you're there, Robin Coleman is our assistant country director. She's the scientific PI on this, and she's she would be there to talk you through, okay, this is how we manage our data. And if you had ideas, or if anyone took on the trip ideas about how to improve that, make it more accessible, get it out, we'd love them. It's like I said, we're focused on the conservation, and there's a lot of areas we can improve on that side. So, absolutely.
Your contact information, and then we can have some discussions.
Yeah, I left a few brochures up here. One just with what we do for oceans generally. One on our Belize program generally, so you can get a bit more background idea. And there's a sign-up sheet, which you don't really need because you can use the email that was sent to you and the website and all that. But if you feel like signing up just to get more information, we'll make sure we kick out some more to you. Yeah.
How well are I saw it was like heritage sites protected? Like, is there a lot of sort of illegal fishing or shark finning pressures or anything like that?
So most of the marine reserves in Belize, the areas that are part of the marine reserves, almost all the shark fishing has been effectively controlled through a lot of intense investment and enforcement. However, it is still legal to fish shark outside of the reserves. Within the reserve itself, so if this is a marine reserve, only a portion, I believe, is a true no-take zone. So in Glover's Reef, it's the southern portion of the reef that is a no-take zone where there's no fishing whatsoever. And then a smaller portion, which is absolute wilderness, which is pretty rare in the ocean. Enforcement varies per area. So we've been working at Glover's for a while, and I would say I am very biased, but if you trust me and I say I'm being objective, our enforcement numbers are very strong in terms of compliance at Glover's Reef right now. We've just moved to South Water Key, which is the biggest reserve in Belize and has a very large no-take zone. And the fisheries department is saying we need help with enforcement. We know there's infractions, and we're trying to figure out solutions to help them and putting more resources into South Water. So it's not perfect, but some areas are quite well enforced. Most of what you see on there as a marine reserve has people on the ground or in the water that are out there are able to. It's a matter of if they have enough people. So, yeah.
So economically, you said earlier the surrounding areas were very dependent on turtle harvesting. Has that changed?
So what is historically Belize, before it was Belize, when it was British Honduras, as a colony, the turtle fishery was the dominant fishery for several hundred years. I mean, it was the most lucrative and the biggest thing that was out there, which says something about the relative size of the colony, but also the abundance of turtles at that time when you're talking several orders of magnitude. Today, turtles are worth a lot for ecotourism. They're not worth anything in terms of financial resources. In other countries, like Nicaragua, people are selling green turtles on the local market, 100% for meat for $25, $35 each. So there's a small microeconomic dependence there. In reality, it's actually more of a protein dependence because 10,000 turtles is quite a lot of meat. But as a driver of trade, CITES, the regime I mentioned previously, has effectively banned most turtle trade for the shell or for the meat. So now, I mean, if you looked at an analysis, I'm sure there's some out there, the value of turtles is tremendously larger in terms of just scuba diving and people seeing them. So, but not anymore. Fisheries are still quite valuable, and shark, as mentioned, shark fin is quite valuable. In the places that don't protect shark, there's a lot of money coming in for the fin, in Belize and everywhere in the world. Any? The lionfish surveys will be part of the coral transects. I think we're deciding what we want to include on the non-turtle transects. So that's still up in the air, and we're deciding exactly what that will be. So yeah, the other half, when we weren't surveying turtle last year, we did lionfish surveys because lionfish is an invasive species that's now pretty much ubiquitous in the Caribbean, unfortunately. It used to be that you saw them out in Indonesia and Papua New Guinea and Fiji, and you thought, this is amazing, I haven't seen a lionfish, wonderful. And now that moment is ruined, but you also look at them in the Caribbean and think, oh, it's just really devastated the areas. So, this is the last question.
Oh. well, maybe I shouldn't waste it.
No, waste it.
No, I just didn't know why they're devastating the area. Do they eat coral?
Well, there's no known predators right now for lionfish, and they do eat to survive, and so they eat a lot of smaller reef fish that you'll see, and they've only been around for about 15 years, so the impact we don't really know yet, but we know that other cases of introduced species have been quite devastating. So yeah, we're trying to encourage things like lionfish hunting. There's a lot of ideas out there about what to do. They're here to stay in reality because of currents. So great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate the time. And probably for any of you that know more in depth on one of the topics we covered today, there's a lot more here. And I hope some of you anyway could come or pass the word to come to Belize and learn more. And like a few of you indicated, help us think about ways to advance our conservation through what you know about. But great pleasure. Thank you.